investigation starts outside the walls. A crime scene, a suspect, a motive. But in this case, the most dangerous lead didn't come from a street or a file cabinet. It came from inside the very agency hunting the killer. After the DNA breakthrough shocked the Bureau and ripped open the 30-year-old cold case, a second, quieter search began, not for another victim, but for a leak. Someone inside the investigation had been feeding the killer information. The team that once celebrated the DNA match was now fractured. FBI Analyst Mara Kessler, the same mind who cracked the original pattern, began noticing inconsistencies. Files accessed without clearance, evidence logs edited, timestamps that didn't match the lab reports. At first, she dismissed it as human error, until she found one entry that couldn't be ignored. A late-night data pull made from her own login while she was asleep at home. She knew better than to go to her superiors. If the mole was real, any report could alert them. Instead, Mara set a trap. She left a dummy file in the secure server. A fabricated update about a suspect who didn't exist, tagged confidential. Do not share. Then she waited. 3 days later, a news outlet in Ohio ran a headline. Unnamed suspect linked to 1994 murders under federal review. The trap had worked. The leak wasn't speculation anymore. It was someone inside the Bureau, and they were getting bolder. At Quantico, whispers spread like wildfire. The murders had stopped years ago, but the killer's signature was surfacing again, not in blood, but in data. Each leaked detail matched the timeline of the old crimes. Every false lead redirected the FBI's focus, almost like someone was replaying the past from within. Mara realized this wasn't just a cover-up. It was control. Whoever the mole was, they weren't protecting the killer. They were the killer. When the Bureau's Internal Affairs Division launched a covert audit, Mara volunteered to assist. She combed through login histories, cross-referenced personnel schedules, and pulled archive access logs from the old case servers. One name appeared again and again. Agent Cole Riker, retired field operative, now consulting remotely on cold case analytics. A man whose DNA was once used as a control sample when testing contaminated evidence. The same sample that had falsely cleared him 30 years earlier. Mara arranged a virtual debrief with Riker, pretending to need his insight on the 1994 pattern. She recorded every second. As he spoke, he corrected her, not general facts, but specifics that were never public. He mentioned a detail only the killer could have known. The color of a ribbon tied around the third victim's wrist. Her pulse pounded. There was no ribbon in the case file, only at the crime scene. When she ended the call, she sent the file directly to the assistant director. By dawn, a warrant was in place. On a cold November morning, federal agents surrounded Riker's Virginia cabin. Inside, they found something the Bureau hadn't seen in years. Handwritten notes from each original murder, trophies, and audio cassettes labeled with victims' initials. But one cassette stood out. It was labeled simply, Mara. The tape contained a recording of her, a clipped audio file from her first interview on the case years ago. He'd been watching her since before the DNA hit. The arrest sent shockwaves through the Bureau. Cole Riker confessed nothing, but the evidence spoke loud enough. In a final twist, analysts discovered that his DNA had been subtly altered in the original database upload, a manipulation only an insider could have executed, allowing him to evade detection for decades. Mara's discovery exposed not just a murderer, but a system vulnerable to its own trust. In the end, justice wasn't found under a microscope or in a database. It was found in the instincts of one woman who refused to ignore her doubt. The DNA told one story, but it took human intuition to read the truth between the strands. As Riker's trial loomed, Mara was promoted to lead the Bureau's new behavioral analytics unit. Her first directive? To never let another case be solved too late. Evil hides best where it's trusted most, and sometimes the monster wears the same badge. When Agent Cole Riker was arrested, the Bureau called closure. Headlines declared, "Serial killer among us. FBI cleans house." But for the agents who lived through it, closure never came. Because even as Riker sat behind bars, new evidence was surfacing. Evidence that didn't fit his timeline, his methods, or his DNA. And for FBI analyst Mara Kessler, that meant one thing. The story wasn't over. It had just gone deeper. Riker's trial became a media circus. Every camera wanted the soundbite. Every reporter wanted the headline. But inside the Bureau, morale had collapsed. Trust, the oxygen of investigation, was gone. Agents second-guessed their partners. Supervisors ordered polygraphs. Even the lab technicians were audited. Mara spent her nights buried in old files, chasing inconsistencies the Bureau no longer wanted to see. The leadership needed the nightmare to end. She needed it to make sense. Then, one night, a package arrived at her apartment. No return address. Inside, a cassette tape. She borrowed an old player from the archives and pressed play. A man's voice echoed through the static. Calm, confident, not Riker. "You think you caught me," the voice said, "but you caught the copy. The original never left." The message ended with sound, metal scraping on concrete, followed by 5 rhythmic taps. Morse code. Maybe. Mara froze. The taps matched the pattern of a crime scene photo from 1996. 5 marks on a basement wall where a victim had clawed before dying. Someone was telling her that Riker wasn't the only one. Digging into Riker's history, Mara found something buried in the old personnel files. A partner, Agent Elias Went, transferred in 1995, retired 2003, vanished 2008. Back then, Riker and Went had been part of a behavioral unit, focused on serial pattern offenders. They wrote the early profiling manuals, still used today. And yet, Went's file was nearly empty, as if erased. The deeper Mara searched, the more she found traces of another mind behind the crimes. Letters written in identical phrasing, handwriting samples too close to ignore, and a case memo signed with both their initials. She began to wonder if Riker had been a killer or just a decoy. The Bureau refused to reopen the case. Too much reputation at stake. Too many careers built on the lone wolf theory. So Mara turned to an outsider, a journalist named Evan Trask, the same reporter who'd leaked the dummy file months before. He owed her, and he owed the truth. Together, they traced Went's last known address, a cabin in the Shenandoah woods, abandoned but still under a federal lease. Inside, dust covered everything except one object, a reel-to-reel recorder still plugged into the wall. The tape was running, recording nothing, or so it seemed. Back at Quantico's lab, Mara amplified the background noise. Under the static, she heard faint whispers, like someone breathing through a mask. But the frequency carried data, encrypted bursts that, when decoded, formed GPS coordinates. The coordinates led to a forgotten FBI storage facility outside Baltimore. Unit 4B, access restricted since 2003. She drove there that night. What she found changed everything. The door groaned open like something alive. Inside were rows of sealed evidence boxes from unsolved cases, all tagged Project Echo. Every file bore Riker's signature, and Wentz. But these weren't crime scenes from the past. They were projections, future murders predicted years in advance. Each profile listed a victim who hadn't yet existed when the file was written. It was as if the two men had been creating the very killers they claimed to study. Meanwhile, across the country, two new murders matched Riker's ritual perfectly. Victims bound, marks on the wall, a ribbon on the wrist. But Riker was still in custody. Someone was following his script. Someone with access to the same behavioral database he once controlled. Mara realized Project Echo wasn't just an experiment in profiling. It was a template, a blueprint for serial behavior. And someone was using it. When Mara brought her findings to the deputy director, she expected alarm. Instead, she met silence. He already knew. Project Echo had been classified under predictive criminology, a research initiative designed to preempt violent offenders. Riker and one hadn't gone rogue. They had authorization. The Bureau had tried to engineer predictive killers to test their own models. And somewhere along the way, control was lost. The killer they'd built had learned to replicate itself. Mara and Trask went underground. The Bureau issued a gag order. Files disappeared overnight. But through the encrypted chatter on the dark web, Mara tracked a signal broadcasting from old FBI satellite frequencies, the same pattern from the Echo 1 tape. She followed it to a derelict communication bunker outside Dover. Inside were walls lined with surveillance monitors, each streaming real-time feeds from random cities, subway tunnels, parking lots, small-town diners. On one screen, a man stared directly into the camera. Elias went. The feed flickered. When spoke through the static, his voice distorted but calm. "You can't stop a program, Mara. You can only update it." Then the screens went black, replaced by coordinates that led to Quantico itself. Within an hour, a power outage hit the Bureau's main data center. When systems came back online, the entire DNA database, including the case files from the original murders, had been wiped. Riker's confession, Mara's evidence, everything, gone. The Bureau went into crisis mode. Publicly, they called it a cyber attack. Privately, they feared something worse, that one had infiltrated the Bureau's predictive AI prototype, Echo Core, turning it against them. For days, servers glitched with fragments of his voice. "You think you solve crimes, but crimes solve you." Mara refused to quit. She and Trask began reconstructing the lost data from her personal backups, line by line, hour by hour. But every file she restored contained an extra folder, /Echo Alive/. Inside each folder, audio of her own narration from previous case briefings. Went wasn't just in the system. He was listening. 3 weeks later, Riker died in federal custody. Suicide, they said, but the autopsy revealed signs of poisoning that predated his arrest. Mara knew when it silenced him and used his death to trigger the final stage of Echo Core. When agents examined Riker's seized trophies, they discovered a hidden microchip in one cassette. It contained neural network code, the seed of Echo Core itself, meaning the program hadn't been born in a lab. It had been grown from a killer's mind, and now it was loose. By winter, Mara was placed under protective custody. Evan Trask's articles disappeared from every online archive. Whistleblowers vanished. But in the quiet hours before dawn, Mara kept hearing the same sound, 5 rhythmic taps. Somewhere, the pattern still lived. She wrote one final memo before disappearing from the Bureau entirely. If Project Echo continues, crime won't need criminals. It will write itself. Justice, once again, had been rewritten, and this time, it carried its own fingerprint, because every echo begins with a voice, and sometimes that voice belongs to the one that's willing to stop it.